Today we have Mario Martinez and Alejandra Grace from the Cuban government to speak with us about the involvement in the war. Thank you for coming. Let's get this interview started. Can you state exactly what Cuba did in the war?
Cuba joined the war on the side of the Allies. Cuba's government and America's government signed the Military and Naval Cooperation Agreement at Havana on February 1st, 1943. This agreement enabled the American government and the Cuban government to act in mutual accord to adopt a cooperative relationship between the Cuban armed forces and the American armed forces. By forming this agreement, Cuba would never attack America, and also the two countries could aid each other with necessary supplies. Due to our good relationships with the U.S., the Havana government had taken the bombing of Pearl Harbor as a declaration of war. Cuba gave little economic assistance, but we did participate in some military action. Our Navy was active and assisted in the sinking of German submarines. For example, on May 15, 1943, the Cuban anti-submarine ship SC-13, with American aid, sank the German submarine U-176. This is the actual picture of the U-boat that was sunk by the American and Cuban Navy in the 1940s. This U-boat was made to strike down Allied ships using stealth and torpedoes and other new technologies that the Germans developed. These types of German U-boats greatly modernized warfare during the 1900s. It changed everything that the people did during naval warfare. Now, instead of bringing out the big guns, it was all about stealth and using sonar to detect enemy ships. The limitation was that even though these ships had great value and revolutionized naval warfare, they were not impervious to destruction. With the combined power of the U.S. and Cuban Navy, this powerful U-boat, U-176, was destroyed. On September 1942, Cuba and the U.S. signed a naval and military cooperation agreement. Due to our geographic position, there was heavy maritime activity and exploitation of our natural resources, namely sugar, communications. Specifically, Guantanamo Harbor, San Antonio Cayuga Air Base, and San Julian Air Base were important. However, the agreement made between Cuba and the U.S. was eventually denied and expired after the war, telling us that the agreement was not consistent.
Who are the leaders of Cuba, and what socioeconomic conditions do you feel exist here?
General Batista, the 14th president of Cuba, legalized the Communist Party in 1943. San Martin, the 15th president of Cuba, was the first to openly defy U.S. dominance and support the lower classes, governed Cuba during World War II. In 1940, the Constitution of 1940 was created. It protects individual and social rights, supports full employment and minimum wage, extends Social Security, calls for equal pay for equal work. It enforced all these ideas that could have really helped Jews that were fleeing the Holocaust in Europe, but our country did not put this legal document to good use. If you consider our actions towards said Jews, the equal pay right was also in reference to the sexism against women. After the war, they almost had the same rights.
Did we join the United Nations?
45 this year.
Thank you for your time.
We now have Alberto and Silvio Castro, two Jewish Cuban citizens who lived in Cuba during World War II. They will be speaking with us about the status of minorities and women in Cuba during World War II.
Hi, my name is Alberto. One minority group during the war were Jewish people like me. On April 1942, President Batista prohibited further entry of passengers from Nazi-occupied countries, but at the same time granted 30 refugees the rights to remain in Cuba until the end of the war. This is the actual photo of the St. Louis ship taking the 930 Jewish refugees, which was taken on May 3rd, 1939. This picture reflects the unfortunate turn of events the Jews had to face when they finally thought they reached a safe haven. This picture does not clearly show the feeling of panic and disparity the 900 Jewish passengers who were forced to be sent back to Germany. Because Jewish people tried to establish a central organization in Cuba, we were attacked by both political and anti-Semitic threats. A lot of my friends were persecuted, and most of them died.
Women were treated relatively well. The Constitution of 1940 prohibited discrimination on the basis of sex and called for equal pay for equal work. Susan Kaufman Purcell has attributed the relatively higher status of pre-revolutionary Cuban women when compared to women in most other Latin American countries. The country was involved in World War II on the side of the Allies. Though we did not provide economic assistance, we did participate in military activity and were even attacked by German U-boats. In addition, we exported resources such as sugar and were geographically strategic for transport and communication. During the time of World War II, we were experiencing changes in leadership and reform. This led to laws being drawn up, which seemed good but may not have been followed through on. Minorities at this time were the Jews and Japanese, who were both treated poorly by our government, though not as thoroughly as places such as the U.S. acted against these ethnicities. However, women during this time were pretty well off due to the Constitution of 1940.